go to our first major story for the morning. Just last week, we saw that the European Union had released their report on the just concluded cycle of election, February 25th election, especially. That's the one election round that brought a lot of buzz. So we saw them enumerate about 6 things that were inconsistent during the just concluded round of election. But then, as the development in that particular conversation, we've seen the presidency refute the European Union's final report, which highlighted 4 lines in the February 25 presidential elections. Now, quoting them, they say, "We strongly reject in its entirety any notion and idea from any organization, group, and individual remotely suggesting that the 2023 election was fraudulent." A statement signed by the President's Special Advisor and Special Duties, Communication and Strategy, Dele Alake, read on Sunday. Now, on March 1st, 2023, the Independent National Electoral Commission announced Bola Tinubu of the All Progressives Congress as the winner of the presidential election. However, the results have been disputed by candidates of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, and the Labour Party, Peter Obi, who alleged that the process was far from credible. Now, we had the chief observer of the EU addressed the press on the 27th of June. The Election Observation Mission, as led by Barry Andrews, noted that the election exposed enduring systemic weaknesses and therefore signaled a need for further legal and operational reforms to enhance transparency, inclusiveness, and accountability. Now, he said the shortcomings in the law and electoral administration hindered the conduct of a well-run and inclusive election and damaged the trust in INEC. Of course, we saw the EU EOM offer 23 recommendations for consideration by the Nigerian government that would improve future elections. Now, that's like the bedrock of everything that happened. Andrew revealed, of course, their particular concern about 6 areas which they identified as priority recommendations. And of course, they believe, if implemented, would contribute to improvements for the conduct of elections. They said remove ambiguities in the law surrounding the elections. They said establish a publicly accountable selection process for INEC members, ensure real-time publication of and access to election results, provide greater protection for media practitioners, address discrimination against women in political life, and impunity regarding electoral offenses. Now, the statement by the Nigerian government reads, "We reject European Union's conclusions on the 2023 general elections."
And the presidency is also alleged bias and intention to impeach the integrity of the 2023 elections, which is described as the best organized general elections in Nigeria since 1999. Now, that is a valid, should I call it a valid question, or should I call it, I'd rather say the presidency is making its own standpoint at this point, and Nigerians also have their own stance, and then the EU, of course, have its own stance. But if we place these on a tripod stand and get to weigh the options, the just concluded elections, let's go to Lagos State. We saw widespread violence. We saw the Oro festival that has never in the history of its existence happened in broad daylight. We saw it happen during the election day just to make sure people did not go out to vote. What has been done to the people who organized the festival? Absolutely nothing has been heard. We saw the violence that, went against the people who were supposed to go vote in a particular area. And they were told. We saw the video footages online. We saw what MCO Lomo, the threat he issued out shortly before the elections. We saw what transpired as a result of the aftermath of his threat to people who were not of his party, were not of his belief, who did not go out to vote for his party. And then we saw the widespread violence that happened in areas where people still say, we are going to go out and exercise our franchise. Fast forward to today, what has been done to MC Olomo? Nothing. What has been done to the areas where violence were, reported? Nothing. Has anybody been arrested? Yes, we've heard of arrests made by the Nigerian police. What are the statements made after that? Nothing. So do we know if Do Nigerians know if someone is being prosecuted for it or investigated on, or if there are going to be prosecutions? Absolutely not. So, as far as these things did happen, I mean, across board, and let's not forget that the EU is an organization that doesn't just issue a statement. They take their time. And during that election, I can say we had them across the different states of Nigeria.
Yeah,
We had them.
and we didn't just have them like during the period of election. The EU EOM were already in the country from January 11, and all of this process with the EU has been done between January 11 and April 11. So they've been in the country observing, entering the nooks and crannies, following up. Of course, INEC had certified them as one of the monitoring groups for the elections. Now we're talking about disparities with in reports coming out from these elections. Nigerians saw what they saw, they heard what they heard, they experienced what they experienced. We've seen the EU come out with their reports, but we also have a sect of Nigerians that keep on scoring the 25th February election as one of the most peacefully and fairly conducted elections in the country. And Nigerians are wondering, were these elections conducted in a different country other than the one that we live in? Because let's say that, okay, yes, these things happened in some areas. Some areas actually did have peace in the process, but we had more widespread discrepancies with the election. Every time we seem to hear an organization discredit the irregularities with the elections, it just further engrinds disrespect to the Nigerian population. Someone needs to acknowledge the fact that a lot of things did not go smoothly with this particular election and tell Nigerians how you intend, to rectify this. Yes, you may not take the reports of the EU hook, line, and sinker, but you cannot say, because now the response from the presidency is saying holistically, right? We can't take anything that the EU is saying, all of it is not right. That is not that's not necessarily true. Now the presidency is also saying that they are faulting the measures that they used to come about their reports. What were the measures? What qualities did they put in place to get about this result? But the information was out there. You can't say everything was wrong. Now, if we even go to the 6 highlighted areas by the EU, we are going to see that these are issues that we can all relate to it as Nigerians. Were there irregularities? Do we have irregularities in our system with regards to the life of women in politics? The answer is yes. What are the other 6 areas that they enumerated? Several other
ambiguities
issues
in the law.
Yes,
Prosecution of
ambiguities
electoral
in the
violence
law.
offenders. Then,
For God's sake, we're talking about the fact that the Electoral Act, they were part of the Electoral Act that we needed lawyers to keep explaining as
and then we had multiple variations of explanations.
Exactly.
We had multiple. Now that's not even a very big concern. What concerns me most is the part of prosecution. What concerns me most Nigerians are also concerned, real-time transmission of election results.
Which was a promise by the Electoral Act.
Exactly.
Yes.
So INEC promised, they delivered it in Osun State and other by-elections before the general elections. But when it came to the general elections, it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. So this is real life experiences. This is something that Nigerians have seen it happen. Mm-hmm. And then we've seen it happen in Osun State. We saw what INEC promised Nigerians because they kept using that as a reference point.
Yeah.
What happened in Osun State is what is going to happen during the general elections.
Yeah.
But when we got to the general elections, we didn't see what happened in Osun State happening. And that's exactly what the EU is reporting. So where is the presidency coming out from? Why or what are their reasons for taking that standpoint? That's the question on the minds of Nigerians right now. Mm-hmm. Are we looking at a presidency who is also going to refuse taking advice? Yes, let's face it. The elections has been over and done with. There are agitations, there are advocacies. Okay, election is over and done with. Elijah Atiku Abubakar, sheathe your sword, don't go to court or withdraw the case. Labour Party presidential candidate Peter Obi, please come back from the court. Let's focus on rebuilding the nation. That argument is there. Some people will call it valid argument. And judging from what Bola Tinubu, the president, has done so far, a lot of people are beginning to toe that path. But then there are also a lot of concerns. Should we really ask these people to come back or not? Now, Atiku Abubakar and the Labour Party have reacted to this. And of course, they're calling the presidency out for taking that kind of stance, regardless of what Nigerians had witnessed during the just concluded elections. Mm. But then, we must come to a point in Nigeria where we admit that if we must bring about change, we must first be able, as a government, to acknowledge with utmost sense of respect, humility, the things that were wrong. Because the first point of correction is admitting that you were wrong, having that humility. Now, if you don't even have the humility to admit that these did not happen in the right way or the way it should have happened,
even as against the laws that you instituted yourself.
exactly.
Yeah.
So if you've not come to that self-realization, to that humble acknowledgement, then you are never going to be able to admit and then commit to making the changes that is required.
True. Well, of course, we've seen the federal government say that the report given by the EU is unfounded. They have said that the EU and other international organizations that have given some kinds of reports do not have substantial evidence to back up, the things that they have said so far. We are still asking the same question. Are we in the same country that these elections were organized? Is the presidency really trying to play, incognito with the things that have happened so far? We're raising a lot of questions, but like Francis has rightly said, if we do not agree with the things that have gone wrong, then we will not be able to build up on things that, would help us correct. Of course, the EU has also said that INEC needs a systemic reform. That is something that a child in this country can easily recommend to the presidency about INEC. But then there you have it, the response of the presidency to the EU reports given concerning the February 25th election. They say it's grandly unfounded and that there are no evidence to back some of the things that they have enlisted.